Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Firstly, I'm dressed like this because I had quite an interesting excursion in the morning. I visited a place called Wakulima Market at 5 in the morning. It's quite an eye-opener. This is the fruit and vegetable market, which is supplying most of Nairobi. Though there are many, there's been a proliferation of them, this is the major one. We were wandering around at 5 o'clock and it's not even lit. Everyone is looking at their goods using their mobile phones. Macro thoughts: US 2 10 years has steepened from its record low of 51.6 basis points, rising 10 basis points over 2 days to 62. And that's obviously curve steepening. That's around the tax act, which is going to is going to add $1.5 trillion to the borrowing requirement over 10 years. This is an image of the mega cap tech stocks' performance in 2017. As you can see, they've been a key driver of stock market outperformance this year. As I said, I visited Wakulima Market this morning. It was a serious eye-opener. Tonight is Shab-e-Yalda, the longest and darkest night of the year. The red hues symbolize the glow of life and the power of light over darkness. Ancient Persian tradition that originated from a time when modern-day Iran was Zoroastrian. Fruits, nuts, pomegranates, watermelon are eaten. And in the UK, of course, it's winter solstice this week and the crowds are already travelling to Stonehenge. Sergio, Larrain, village of Los Horcones, fishermen, daughters, Chile, 1956. And it's such a happy photograph. I liked it. I'm looking forward to being at the beach, I really am. This is the beach at high tide. That was August 2015 in Diani. It's a major beach resort on the Indian Ocean coast of Kenya. About 10 kilometers long from the Congo River, which I've also visited, where they tell me the mosque there is the oldest one in Africa. To the north, Ngalu Beach, where we're going to be this time. And to the south, the southern point of reference is an old baobab tree. General area is known for its coral reefs, black and white colobus monkeys, and for the closely located Shimba Hills National Reserve. Diani Beach is also a popular kite surfing location, and I loved a visit. We've been there about 10 times, I think, in August 2015 and October 2012. This is a photograph of the sunrise early in the morning. We're nearly there, 2018 or season 3 of the apocalypse, says Karl Marx, who's a very witty fellow on Twitter. And finally, The Sleeping Gypsy by Henry Rousseau. Prime Minister Theresa May is seen in this photograph heading to the House of Commons from number 10 for the last Prime Minister's question time of 2017. Theresa May reminds me of Muhammad Ali, his rope-a-dope in Kinshasa. It seemed to keep punching, but he never gave up, and she doesn't seem to be either. Damian, however, who was a very close political ally of the Prime Minister, was sacked as first Secretary of State after porn allegations. An investigation by the Cabinet Secretary, Sir Jeremy Haywood, found that Green's vehement denials after a Sunday newspaper reported that porn had been found on his computer were both inaccurate and misleading. His departure is a personal blow for Theresa May, who brought him into Downing Street after her majority was wiped out in June's general election to help shore up her authority. Third cabinet minister to step aside since early November, following the departures of Michael Fallon and Priti Patel. If anyone can save the UK economy, it's Jeremy Corbyn. He wiped out Labour's 25 million debt in 3 weeks, Dennis Skinner said of Jeremy Corbyn. I still think he's being very slow to pivot on the Brexit issue. According to the Telegraph, the US is making plans for a bloody-nose military attack on North Korea. America is drawing up plans for a bloody-nose military attack on North Korea to stop its nuclear weapons program. The Telegraph understands the White House has dramatically stepped up preparation for a military solution in recent months, and amid fears diplomacy is not working, well-placed sources said. One option is destroying a launch site before it is used by the regime for a new missile test. Stockpiles of weapons could also be targeted. Three sources, two former US officials familiar with current thinking and a third figure in the administration, confirmed military options were being worked up. I take you back to the article I wrote in September when I was quoting Pynchon yet again, "Streaming comes across the sky." And I said one of the strategies of the pre-regime change moment has been to demonize the other leader. And front and center in Kim's mind must be the image of Saddam Hussein being hung by his neck, and Muammar Gaddafi meeting his death after being sodomized with a bottle. When you view things from Kim the Rocket Man's perspective, you might appreciate that far from being illogical, he is in fact being ruthlessly logical. And he is speaking the language his adversaries understand lucidly. 10 million folks in Seoul, just 60 kilometers from the border. Nearly 30,000 US soldiers are all in the line of fire. There is plenty of myth-making in our new media universe, but what is interesting is how singularly effective Putin in particular has been in his mission to break the monopoly of Anglo-Saxon global information streams. And one of those myths is that Xi Jinping, with some cajoling, made to effect a clean break with Pyongyang. Consider that Pyongyang is a buffer state between China and the US, and that Pyongyang is, in fact, a near-perfect geopolitical attack dog. The attack dog is not on a Chinese leash, but it's surely aligned with the resurgent, rising China, whose aim is to surely eject the US and its allies from what it considers its sphere of influence. Just take a look at the South China Sea, where the US and its allies have largely capitulated, and the US is now left performing some half-hearted and quite forlorn freedom of navigation operations once in a blue moon. North Korea, by lobbing those missiles over Japan, is seeking to prize Japan away from its US alliance, something that China is surely trying to achieve as well. When you look at geopolitical alignment, it's entirely unlikely that the West has anything to offer the Chinese that can compensate for the loss of North Korea, their hinterland, their buffer, and their instrument of attack. FT's year, in a word, is dotard. Interesting piece in The Guardian about our minds can be hijacked, the tech insiders who fear a smartphone dystopia, particularly aware of the allure of Facebook likes, which he describes as bright dings of pseudo-pleasure that can be as hollow as they are seductive. And Rosenstein should know he was the Facebook engineer who created the like button in the first place. Very interesting piece. I like this. Sir Humphrey explains Brexit. Have a listen. Saudi Arabia's year of living dangerously, that's the FT, saying cinemas are preparing to open in Saudi Arabia. One can just imagine the plot. It stars Mohammed bin Salman, 32-year-old crown prince who emerged in 2017 as the de facto ruler, with supporting roles by Jared Kushner, US President's son-in-law, and the prince's new best friend, and tough-looking guys in the roles of inconvenient royal cousins and unpleasant mullahs in Iran. When bored with the business of overhauling his kingdom, waging war, or shaking down the rich and famous, the prince takes a vacation in the south of France on his $500 million yacht, aptly named Serene. Or he crosses the border to visit a museum where he finds peace by staring at a $450 million Leonardo da Vinci painting, which is a subplot of its own. And basically saying that, I think she's highly skeptical. Wars are not won immediately, and sadly there are a few setbacks, but victory is in the long term assured. In the film as in the real world, the people of the kingdom and those living around it learn the most important lesson. There is a new Saudi Arabia, and it likes to live dangerously, which is what I was kind of saying about peace in November. And I said NBS arrived on the scene, immediately launched an unwinnable war in Yemen. President Assad, with his Russian, Iranian, Lebanese allies, resisted the regime changes in Syria. IS, which was a Sunni and a Saudi blade, has been eviscerated. Iraq, which was once firmly in the Saudi camp, is now aligned with Iran. Qatar is lost. Bahrain, UAE, Kuwait are caught in an ever-tightening Shia's pincer. So the paranoia in the palaces in Saudi Arabia is real and existential, and now the Houthis have shot at Al-Yamaha. What is also clear is that Bibi, MBZ, Jared Kushner and Trump carte blanche have all leveraged this existential paranoia to good effect. Not to affect a state capture, but kingdom capture. The Guptas were a precursor for this particular capture. So the existential paranoia in the head of a 32-year-old wannabe king is evidenced in this comment about Iran in May this year. How can I communicate with them while they prepare for the arrival of Al-Mahdi al-Muntazar? And of course it's interesting that whilst they're preparing for that, he's buying Salvatore Mundi, savior of the world. Earth will likely warm way beyond the crucial tipping point that the Paris Agreement was meant to avoid. This is the World Economic Forum. And as I said in November 2015, we have created massive interference in the cosmic fine-tuning phenomenon. Let's move on to the currency markets because there's plenty going on in there. Euro 118.77 last. Dollar index 93.41. Needs to regain that 93.50 level. Japanese yen, now that's been grinding higher. Dollar yen has been grinding higher, 113.50. Kuroda was speaking today and was extremely benign. Swiss franc 0.9857, the pound 133.77. The Australian dollar is at, where are we? The Australian dollar 0.7657, India rupee 64.095, South Korean won 1081.81, the Rial 29.81, Egyptian pound 17.8393, South African rand. Look at a humongous rally anticipating Ramaphosa. It's backed up a little. We're last at 12.75, but I think it's headed to 12. But the issue will be how quickly Ramaphosa can decapitate President Zuma. Dollar index, I think you've got to keep an eye on the 93.50 level. This chart is from T Commodity. Euro dollar, which have become more bullish, it's trading higher. And I think any spike in bond yields will be matched by a spike in bond yields. That's going to be supported as well. So I think on balance, look, bottom side is 114.50, but I think we're going back to 120.60. Dollar yen, as I said, that edges up after BOJ's Kuroda briefing, which sounded dovish, last trading at 113.51. Yapian, which operates the U-Bit exchange in South Korea, suspended trading on Tuesday after it was hacked, causing it to lose 17% of its assets. This is part of the problem with trading these cryptocurrencies. Crude oil, this chart is one of Brent and WTI's compared. I'm of the view that the crude spot market will reprice further and that Brent crude will trade over $70 a barrel. WTI just below $58, my target is $64.99. Gold, now that's been grinding higher of late, last trading at 1265.61. I think some of those concerns about South Korea are feeding into the gold market. Asahi agrees to sell its stake in Qingdao for $847 million. Dialogue committee officials says South Sudan has collapsed, stating the obvious. Angola oil giant probes into possible misappropriation of funds by Isabel dos Santos when she was CEO. Identified a suspect transfer of 57 million euros, probing a monthly payment that began when Isabel became the head of the state oil giant of 10 million euros to a Portuguese company. Reported that the new head of Sonangol has written to his predecessor to demand explanations as well as alerting law enforcement agencies. Prosecutors in Luanda told AFP on Tuesday that they had not received a formal complaint. Dos Santos hit back alleging a campaign of defamation. This fake news doesn't deserve any credibility since their only goal is to cast doubt on the integrity of Isabel dos Santos. I always worry when people speak of themselves like that. And I spoke about this before when I spoke about the unraveling of the Dos Santos empire. And I said Lorenzo is burning the ground under their feet. Very interesting essay by George B.N. Aite, Chinese Investments in Africa, Chopsticks Mercantilism. In the early parts of the 21st century, China became an important source of finance for African development. The continent's infrastructure was in disrepair. It had crumbled after decades of abject neglect and destruction from senseless civil wars. A substantial investment was and still needed to rebuild this infrastructure. According to a World Bank study, the poor state of infrastructure in sub-Saharan Africa, its electricity, water, roads, and ICT, cuts national economic growth by 2 percentage points every year, reduces productivity by as much as 40%. To close the infrastructure gap, an annual spending of $93 billion would be required. Africa, however, did not have the funds, but had natural resources which China needed to feed its economic machine, galloping at a dizzying 9% clip in 2006. So China went looking for resources in Africa and elsewhere, wooing African leaders with diplomatic platitudes about equal terms and lofty promises of foreign aid without conditions. It declared 2006 the year for Africa and convened an Africa conference in Beijing in November. That was music to the ears of African leaders and miffed at the West's insistence on conditionalities for its aid. Operating on the fallacious notion that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, 48 African heads of state, mostly from sub-Saharan Africa, tripped over themselves to the conference, threw caution to the wind, and began signing a blizzard of infrastructure for resources, deals, or exchanges. These deals were touted as win-win for both. As Benjamin noted, within a decade, some 1 million Chinese have moved to Africa. Chinese-African trade rose by a factor of 10 to 115 billion. Chinese direct investment rocketed to more than 9 billion from less than 0.5 billion in 2003. China is now the largest trading partner for the continent, including North Africa. Chinese trade with Africa hit 222 billion in 2014, making China the region's biggest trading partner for a sixth consecutive year. Among the Chinese projects are the Husab uranium mine in Namibia, Chinese military base in Djibouti, an $8 billion high-speed railway through Nigeria, and a $4 billion 466-mile transnational railway from Djibouti to Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, are just a few of the Chinese projects already built or underway across the continent. Chinese mining investments have increased 25-fold in just 10 years, from stakes in a few mines to more than 120 in 2015. Chinese investments in Africa did not produce the glorious win-win results most analysts had expected. In many countries, infrastructure for resources deals were of dubious nature. Under many of those deals, some shady Chinese middlemen or syndicates undertook feasibility studies, estimated the cost of the infrastructure project, and then they sought financing from China's Exim Bank. For repayment, they demanded a quantum of the African country's resources to be shipped to China, essentially a barter deal. Under this scheme, there was every incentive to inflate the cost and make the deal as gargantuan as possible. The higher the cost estimate, the larger the loan, and the larger the loan, the greater the quantum of resources that has to be shipped to China for repayment. A high cost estimate obviously benefited the Chinese company that would undertake the construction, as that translated into huge profits. And the more gargantuan the loan, the more swollen-headed the African head of state who soon stood to extract much political mileage from it. For example, China offered ex-President Captain Musa Dadis Camara of Guinea a $7 billion infrastructure for resources deal in 2009. Guinea's GNP was only $4.5 billion. Throughout its history, no entity had given Guinea such a huge loan, and even that one exceeded its GNP. Not even the World Bank came close. Clearly, the price that China charges for building oil refineries varies wildly among African countries. Even more outrageous was that China was demanding in exchange a sixth of Nigeria's 36 billion oil reserves. A simple multiplication by the price of oil at $107 a barrel yielded $642 billion, which is what China was demanding for a $23 billion infrastructure project. A few strokes on a cheap calculator would reveal that over the 15-and-a-half-year period, 74 million barrels of oil would be shipped to China. The value at the price of crude oil works out to be $8.1 billion. Nice repayment for a loan of $3 billion. In those sweet and sour deals, sweet for China, sour for Africa, there were additional costs. Since the deals were signed with mostly autocratic African governments that were not transparent or subject to scrutiny, in many cases they were secured through secrecy, outright bribery, kickbacks, for example building a presidential palace for Sudan's despot, donating the blue tiles that adorned Robert Mugabe's new £7 million palace in Harare, a large Namibian palace, presidential palace in Windhoek, sports stadiums in Congo DR and Guinea. Look, it's a great story, he's absolutely right, but Xi Jinping is not Santa Claus, and the Sri Lankans discovered he is hard-nosed. They had to disgorge, they gorged on Chinese debt, had to disgorge the port, Hambantota port, to China for 99 years. And so it's very, very clear to me that there's a certain naivety amongst our leadership. Zimbabwe's Mnangagwa hints at appointing military chief as vice president. My piece in November was the genie's out of the bottle. In brackets today I put okay, maybe not, because it seems to be more of the same. I'm not sure that's sustainable in the medium term. Felipe Nyusi says phone calls with the Renamo leader have built bridges. Trust led to a durable truce. South African oil shares up 14.57% this year. Steinhoff slumps to new lows after investors sue Germany. The case against the owner of mattress firm in the US and Conforama in France was filed in Frankfurt District Court. TILP law firm said in a statement on Wednesday. Investors are seeking to recover funds after the South African company reported accounting irregularities, causing the stock to slump about 90% over 2 weeks. And obviously it's flirting with collapse. Have a look at the price chart. And I wrote about it on the 11th of December and called the South African media out for being in a forensic cul-de-sac in the face of what was their Enron. Dollar versus Rand at 12.75. I think we're going to go up to 12. Nigerian oil share up 41.15% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange Index up 50.81% so far year to date. President Kenyatta held talks with the Ugandan President Kaguta Museveni, focused on bilateral and regional issues. Here, a Maasai woman is seen after police officers lobbed tear gas at a group from the community. Nairobi oil shares up 27.49% year to date, but it's down 3.414% since closing at a 35-month high on December the 11th. NSE 20s up 16%. New motor vehicle sales were the lowest in 8 years here in Kenya, speaks to the weakness in the economy. Once again, thank you kindly for stopping by. I do appreciate it.